and welcome back to the Undoctrinate Yourself podcast. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back with a great guest for you. This is Ryan Walker, and in past episodes, I've been doing some brief introductions for people, but I really want to start pivoting to having people introduce themselves a little bit because I feel like what I might think is important or or just like relevant about somebody's identity maybe not is not what they would represent themselves as. So I want to give people that opportunity to describe themselves in the beginning as they would like. So, welcome, Ryan. And do you want to just give us a little brief intro or just some gist of what you encompass, what you do in life, and then we'll obviously dive into the details of your journey and what that looks like.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here. Not happy to give an introduction. I think I suck at these, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it a shot. Um, I'm Ryan Walker. I am a steak and egg enthusiast. I have cooking accounts. I talk a lot about physical fitness, mental health, nutrition, ingredient sourcing. A little bit of a checkered past. I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit. And yeah, I'm just lover of life and all things good food.
Amen. We're in good company here, and same. And also, you guys might know him on Instagram as Cooking at Keto, and is it Stags? Your
Yeah,
page?
steaks.
Yeah.
Well, the steak and the egg, but yeah,
Steak and
the
egg, yeah.
abbreviation is steaks.
Love it, love it. Absolutely amazing. And I actually found you in a very random way. A friend of a friend who lives in Germany sent me your account and was like, "Do you know this guy? He lives in New Jersey." I was like, "No, I have no idea who this is." And I went on your page and I was like, kindred spirit
Yeah.
immediately. Like, we need to talk. And so we started DMing, and I also just found out you were 20 minutes away or so. So, like, had to do it in person. I'm glad we're out here doing
I
it.
I love those like small world stories. Like your friend in Germany, and it turns out
Yeah.
I'm down the street, and yeah, it's great.
It's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild. So I know you have a bit of a journey, and I'd really like to discuss it here because I think it's always so interesting to see how people's experiences have formed their trajectory in life. And like, same with me as well. I've been on a very like winding journey to where I am today. And so I always love to hear about how people got to where they are. So do you want to share a bit about maybe what you did before you got into this line of work and in these interests, and maybe your past life, because based on some like before and after pictures I've seen on your page, it seems like you've had quite the transformation.
Yeah. Yeah, let's dive right into it. I was not always into like health, food, fitness, like all the mental health. I was not always into all these things. It was actually like quite the opposite. So from the age of about 18 until 28, like I was like a very, very captured, severely depressed drug addict. Um Mainly prescription pills, which has given me a lot of the insight that I still hold now about the pharmaceutical industry, which I'm sure we'll get into. But all drugs, I didn't really discriminate. So, I was a freshman in high school trying crack and heroin for the first time.
Whoa.
Yeah,
You went
yeah.
right into the
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, then kinda dropped back to prescription pills, but everything was always, in the mix. I like to say, as a drug addict, I didn't discriminate. So, it was all fair game. But, yeah, I was really, just in such a bad place for a long time. Like, if you see videos now of, like, Philadelphia or something where you see all the people sleeping and standing up, that's, like, how I operated for years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then along with like the drug use was like, I went multiple years without drinking water.
Whoa.
Like
Wow.
my diet was fast food, candy, Gatorade, and soda. And,
Jeez.
so like just like kind of even contrasting my state of mind now with like how I was back then, it's just it just like gives me goosebumps, like just to think, how I once was. But
Also, how resilient the body is. I mean, same with me. I was
yeah.
not eating well my entire childhood, and I had a lot of issues with mold exposure, and I was very obese, and all the issues. And once you decide to make a change and start doing things the right way, the body can just bounce back so quickly, especially if you make these realizations when you're younger, and it's just so miraculous.
Yeah, I remember when I was this was probably like the last year of my addiction. we had like a volleyball net set up in the backyard. And I was a very skilled drug addict in the fact that every day for 10 years I secured what I needed to, limited limited withdrawals in between. But so I was like high and we secured the volleyball net and like had a bunch of people over there playing. And I remember like after like 30 seconds or like maybe a minute, like I felt my whole like chest collapsing, my like legs getting weakened. I was also 50 pounds overweight, and had a bunch of other issues. But yeah, just to go from that to then fast forward to where I am now, especially like, at a physical fitness level, it's just it's night and day. It's a complete game changer.
Truly, I mean, you're a different person
Yeah.
ultimately. And so what was there a specific moment or a trigger or something that was brought into your field that made you want to get curious about changing the way you were living, or what was the impetus?
I've talked about this before. It's so weird. It's weird to say, but I don't know if I've never heard like other people say this, but I guess I'm just one cocky son of a bitch in that like even when I was at my worst, like driving half asleep, like not owning a pair of like a piece of clothing that wasn't covered in cigarette burns. Like I literally didn't have one shirt, one pants, like nothing that even when I was like that, I still had this like image in the back of my head of myself that looks like where I'm at now.
Mhm.
Like from the fitness to the health to the food, everything. I just always had like I always had a thing that like, one day we're just gonna check it into gear and you're just be, the like the absolute like, you could reach your physical and mental potential. Like I just never let go of that. So then, going back to when I was 28, I'm at the end of a 10-year run here and just burning bridges, horrible mental health, like, pretty severe depression, lack of no no drive, like no love life, no drive for it, burning bridges with friends, just totally just torturing my family. And it was just a buildup. And one day I was like, you know what, that's it. Let's go for it. And that's what I did. I didn't go to rehab and do the whole AA thing. Nothing against that. That's like amazing. That helps so many people. And if somebody was in, a bad spot, that'd be something that I would recommend for them to do. But for me personally, I knew that it wasn't going to be a good fit for me. So luckily my drug dealer also sold Suboxone, which is what they give you in those rehabs. But the problem with that is that, a lot of people will go to rehab, go to AA, do this, and they'll stay on Suboxone for like years, maybe even like permanently.
Yep.
And that's not something that I wanted anything to do with. So I got myself some just to avoid like some of the really intense physical elements of the withdrawal. But just kind of weaned myself with that Suboxone for a month. And then I actually used a lot of like, I call it THC therapy,
Mhm.
but you could also say smoking weed
Mhm.
because there's actually a lot of good science for opioid addicts and that like THC can like help repair the neural pathways that you damage. Like there's a really cool scan you could see of a brain of an opioid addict, and it looks like an abandoned city.
Mm.
And then you show the scan with like a little THC therapy, and it looks like New York City at night. Like everything's lighting up, firing. So yeah, I quit on my own, cold turkey. Used the Suboxone for a month, did some THC therapy, and then slowly started falling in love with food for the first time ever.
Wow, well, I mean, that's a different way to get dopamine, right? A much
Yeah.
healthier way of getting good dopamine hits. But that's also really interesting about the cannabis too, because we know like the endocannabinoids are stimulating the dopamine system as well. And if you're using opiates, like you're basically like flooding your brain with dopamine all the time to get that feel good chemistry. And there's so many different ways that we can acquire that too, like through lifestyle, through nutritional means, through just like finding your purpose and your passion. It's like all engaging these mechanisms and pathways as well. But I think food is amazing and we definitely share that as well. Like I've always been a major foodie and it's been a major outlet for me to like just show my love and my care and just like a way of just being able to kind of shower people with health and also with something that feels good and tastes good too. So I
Yeah.
love that. What was your initial exposure to food? Had you been exposed to like cooking or anything as a kid, or what was the like motivation there?
Yeah, so growing up, and like maybe like in college a little bit, like this is like during my addiction, I might like hop on the grill a little bit, like grill burgers or something, like not even steak, like just something easy, like, but I was never really like into cooking or did it or like took a passion about it. But, going 10 years like eating fast food, and before that, I was kind of like a picky eater in like high school and childhood. Not picky in like a general sense, but compared to where I'm at now, extremely picky. So then when I got sober and I started like eating these different foods for the like first time really ever, like with a sober mind and a clean palate, and it was amazing. Like I just fell in love, and I just immediately just started diving in and just trying everything. And it was actually the home fries at the gas station where I got my sausage, egg, and cheese that like really got me into it, because I never like they had like a little bit of peppers and onions in them, and like my whole life I never like ordered them. And then I'm in this like sober mind, like, hey, like, screw it,
Branching out.
let's try them. And then I tried them, they were like amazing. So and then it just started growing from there. I tried all these different things and really fell in love with it. But so this is how I got into cooking too, because eventually down the line, I'm sober for about like a year and a half or something like that, and I wanted to lose weight. So my dad did like a keto Atkins kind of thing. So that was something I was familiar with. And I didn't even like look into like health benefits, and all I wasn't really concerned about ingredients or like overall nutrition really, but I wanted to lose weight. So I started doing keto. Problem with keto is you can't really be going out to eat, ordering, keto meals. But if you learn how to cook, you could kind of like replace a couple ingredients and make some like delicious food. So that's what I did. I like started teaching myself like very simple recipes, and then eventually one of my buddies convinced me to start the Instagram page. And then after that, it just was like a compounding effect. Like, then all of a sudden you're exposed to like different stuff. You start pulling from here, there. It's like opens up your creativity, and yeah, it was off to the races for me.
Wow. So when did MasterChef enter this picture?
All right. So I was actually doing the cooking for a couple years, and I was actually really successful in my construction career. Um like I told you before, I was doing a lot of hospital work, and I was managing big sites, and it was a great job. But MasterChef contacted me a little over a year ago, and I was in the middle of a transitional period with work, so I I took the offer, and they found me on Instagram. So I had like like 14,000 followers or something like that. So they found me. It's like this cooking a keto page. This guy thinks he can cook. So like they thought they were setting me up, but what they didn't know is that when I confirmed to be on Master Chef, I'm like, okay, I could cook proteins better than the rest of them. I like cook eggs, steaks, chicken, like all that's good. But I had never like baked a cake, really, like a real cake. I did some keto ones, but never like baked a cake, never like made pasta. So a month before Master Chef, maybe a month and a half, I just went straight up like culinary school in my kitchen, just every day, all day, just videos, just studying recipes, trying stuff out. And yeah, then I went on the show last year. Got stabbed in the back by Gordon Ramsay. Gordon, I know what you did. Um,
coming for you.
But it was great though. MasterChef was amazing. I'm so happy about being on the show just because when I came back from filming prematurely, I shouldn't have been back that quick. But when I came back, I didn't go back to my construction career. Like I went all in on the food stuff. So this is where me and my dad, we built the outdoor kitchen that I
Mm.
use to host my dinners right now at the Steak and the Egg. Um, I started doing that and then that kind of blew up, grew organically. And now I got my butter and my butcher shop, Dutch Hill Farm in Spring Lake. You could go in and buy my butter like right off the shelf. And yeah, we're about to open up the Steak and the Egg for my tasting menu again in the next, like I think we're towards the end of April. And best food in New Jersey. And yeah, so I'm so thankful for Master Chef, but the actual show, I wasn't too happy at the time.
Wait, so I always wonder how much of that's was it? Did it feel staged? Like what was it like on set?
So generally speaking, like reality TV, they like people are malleable. So, like if they want to have like a certain thing said or like kind of produce a storyline, they can put somebody into a little interview room and they can get what they want out of you.
Hmm.
But so like yeah, there's always like a little bit of like drama inducing things that they'll kind of like pull up, and some people are better for than others for that. So like, they might bring person A in and like 2 minutes later they got the good line they want. They might person B in and an hour later it's not going too good. They're not saying what they're supposed to say.
So is it scripted or is it just suggested?
It's not scripted,
Okay.
but like any reality TV, you got to realize that you're watching like a 60-minute show. There's probably 10 hours of interview footage for that.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? It's not scripted, but you can make it feel or look how you please in the edit room. But the one thing I will say about Master Chef is the cooking is real.
Okay, that's good
Like
news.
when that timer goes off,
Yeah.
like that timer starts and you're running to grab your ingredients, and when that timer is counting down, you're plating your food, and like everything that happens in between it's all you and the food. Like, it's real in the fact that you have to cook that dish in that amount of time.
That's why I always wonder, like on Chopped too. It's like, do they ever get wiggle room at the end, or is it just drama for the show, or is it real? But I mean, I'm assuming it's similar between the two. It seems like it would be very stressful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, sometimes like a lot of shows will be like, just to make sure you got the proper end shot, they'll like you might have to like start your plating with a certain amount of time left. So if you pick a dish where you have like some extra time in there, that's not good for TV. But you're still cooking that food in that amount of time, and hopefully you get it plated. That was actually a problem I had. You didn't see many of my plated dishes on the show, but when I would plate at home, I never did it with a timer. And
Hmm.
with a timer, it's like kind of difficult. Like you got to get a little artsy in like 60 seconds or 2 minutes. It's not the easiest thing. And me, I still have construction fingers,
Uh-huh.
so they're really good for the grill and that I don't get burnt, but plating, not so much.
Yeah, that makes sense. So walk us through like when you first, got accepted onto MasterChef, where was it filmed, first of all? Where did you have to travel to?
Went to LA.
Okay, how was that?
Weird. This was last year, so and like LA is probably still to this day, like, and especially in the film industry, like they're like they still have all their COVID
Oh yeah,
protocols.
they're insane out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then plus, I mean, this I understand. They don't want to like, Fox Master Chef, they put a lot of money into filming these setups, so they don't want you to like compromise with the outside world. So I was, basically locked in a hotel for a month.
Wow.
Like I was like at the end of it, I was like, I need to touch grass. Like you need to
Yeah.
bring me to the park. I need to touch grass. Like, but yeah, and I'm like, I, I cook all my own food. Every day I cook, pretty much every meal. So for me to go out to LA no yoga, no hot yoga, no cooking, no going outside. I'm like pasture raised, so that was a lot for
Yeah,
me. It
that's
was,
rough.
yeah, it was a big change. So that was tough to get used to, but raw milk is legal in
Mhm.
California, so that kind of brought my spirits up. And
That's one thing.
I was just chugging raw milk for a month
Oh my
there.
God, it's so stupid here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some, I'm not gonna say here, but like there's some ways you can order it and it's fine. Like we have a couple farms in PA that you can get from, and but it's just the idea that you can't buy raw milk, but you can go and buy alcohol and you can buy
Yeah.
cigarettes and you can, you know.
So every 2 weeks, I cross the Pennsylvania border,
Yeah.
and there's an awesome farm there, the Family Cow. They have a couple
I got it from
locations.
them.
Yeah, they have a
Yeah.
couple locations on the border. And yeah, I just go there, pick up a couple gallons. Raw milk actually stays good like way longer than regular milk, which is weird. You wouldn't think that,
It
but
is weird.
yeah, so yeah, it's my current setup. But I'm really nervous because the Amish in PA.
I
There's
know.
this guy
They've been
Amos,
cracking down.
yeah, Amos Miller. Like
Yeah.
the Pennsylvania government is trying to like not only stop him from selling his products, they like destroyed a bunch illegally. They're trying to stop him from being able to eat his own products. So they're telling him it's illegal for you to milk your cow and drink that milk. It's illegal for you to get this off your farm and feed it to your pigs. Like it's absolutely insane and super scary, especially for someone in Jersey who's relying on Pennsylvania to not be complete psychos. But
Right. I mean,
yeah,
talk about government overreach. I mean, there's certain aspects of government that are important to make society run, but not like, why are they policing what people are putting in their mouth? Meanwhile, they're like endorsing fast food and other bullshit food that like is actually harming people and making the things that are actually going to help people illegal. It's like,
yeah.
what are they actually up to here?
Yeah, and their big thing is like salmonella, E. coli. Like, where are you most likely to get that produce?
Yeah,
It's like in the
totally.
lettuce at Taco Bell. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's where
Yes.
people get sick from.
And it's like the produce that's shipped from other countries. It's not even like if people were just buying like locally produced foods, seasonal foods from maybe they're growing their own food or raising their own animals or from a local farm, like you're way less likely to get contamination from those. But I guess they don't want to actually look at the data to see what's actually going on. And there's clearly some other agenda going on.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, 100%. Like, the best chicken eggs you can get are like covered in a little bit of poop and like have a feather on the shell. Like,
Exactly.
that's the best stuff. Like,
It's
yeah,
real. It's real food.
yeah,
I mean, the direction things are going is just, between like eating bugs and the fake meat. It's just like,
yeah.
what are we doing here?
Yeah, and then you have the whole water thing that we
Oh
were
yeah.
just talking about. So like my whole life, you know, for when I was younger, it was probably more like a financial thing with my family. We have like there's an open spring like 15 minutes away. So like literally a pipe just coming out of the ground that's connected to a natural spring and you go fill it up. And you know, so my whole life we've been drinking out of this thing. Obviously when I was in my 10 years of zombification, I really didn't give a shit. But since I like embraced this whole like health conscious journey, like that spring was huge to me. Like that was like I don't drink like bottled water, like plastic bottles. I'm good. No thank you. Tap water, fluoride. No thank
Mm-mm.
you. So I had this like awesome spring water source and they have like a little sign there that says like waters from an unknown source, like boil or something like that. It's just like kind of to protect them.
Liability.
But
Yeah.
you know, as you they just closed my spring a few months ago. And then I started looking into it. They've been doing this all across the state. And
Hmm.
if you look at it countrywide, like water rights, like farmers, like regular citizens have been getting absolutely screwed with water rights and just access to like real spring water that hasn't been flooded with some chemicals or purified or laced with microplastics. And it's, you know, it's scary. Luckily, I was able to find a spring in Neptune, Kepwell. And so I've been going there now. And you know, it sucks. I shouldn't have to pay for it, but it's better than drinking poison.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just thinking right now about this amazing doctor. I don't know if you know him, Dr. Jack Cruz, but he's big on like decentralization in general and money, but also in health. And I think the water story is just a perfect example, but also the food story about how like everything goes to shit when you start to centralize, because you can only, like, from a centralized entity's perspective, like, you can only control so many variables, and things are going to slide, or you're just going to have blind spots, and the people or the consumers are going to be the ones suffering. And so, I mean, I think really, and it seems like this has also been your journey too, in like your healing journey, but it's certainly been the case for me as well, that it's like the personal responsibility piece is everything. And it's like basically decentralizing your life and trying to take as much control of the variables that you can within your own power. So like trying to find good quality water, maybe raising your own chickens, or growing some food, or finding a source of good quality food near you from a local farm or something like that. And that really can make the biggest difference, because you're consciously, like, you're putting your awareness somewhere that is going to kind of create energy in that area. So if you're focusing on your food and your health, then you're going to build health, you're going to build awareness in that area. And so a lot of what people run into, I think, is really just like being unconscious about things. And if you follow the status quo, then you get the status quo diseases.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'm a libertarian, so decentralization is my love language.
Yes.
So and that's like huge. It's huge in our food supply. And I kind of a big supporter, like, on Twitter or Instagram, like always shouting out these guys. They're like, I'm a big proponent of regenerative animal agriculture. And like a big reason why this is like not it's not more mainstream, it's not propped up, and it's kind of hidden by like mainstream entities, is because it's not scalable.
Exactly.
It's replicatable,
Yeah.
but that's replicatable on small scales. So that like decentralizes the food system, and that's less control, that's less profits. And when everything's owned by BlackRock and Vanguard, they're not gonna be too happy about that. So it's tough, but decentralization, and especially in like a state like this, like where that's why I really believe in regenerative animal agriculture, because like people say like that there's no way you could feed everybody like that. And like I'm like, yeah, with our current mindset, like how we currently operate. But like New Jersey is it is the most densely populated state in the country. And if everybody had, some chickens in a garden instead of a manicured lawn, like that's huge. That's like half the food for the state right there. And then, we're the garden state. Like if we could do that and pull that off, then anybody can. But that's like a huge mental shift in like all of society that would be needed for like something like that. But
Absolutely. I mean, lawns are just kind of BS. Like, actually, in my dream home, I'd love to have like a clover lawn, because clover it re adds nitrogen to the soil too, which is really helpful from like a strips topsoil perspective. Um, but also just like using your land for something productive. It just doesn't have to be for show. And I remember seeing a stat recently that like in 1900, like people grew 50% of their food in their own yards.
yep.
And it's been what, just over 100 years, and we've made such a wild shift. And you can see just everything, all health metrics and happiness metrics going downhill. And it's like, we can kind of get back to what we were doing, and or at least reinvent it in a way that makes sense for today's society. But I think there's certainly something there, and I don't know why there's such a resistance to understanding this, and unless people are just, well, actually, I have some theories on this, but I don't know if you have thoughts on it.
I do. I want to say, like, last summer, maybe 2 summers ago, whenever. I do it all the time. So, but it never gets old. Like me, like I wanted a little breakfast. So I go out in the morning and like go down to the garden and pick something, like pick a pepper or something, or maybe an onion, something like that. And like, get some eggs from the chicken coop, and like cooking breakfast with those ingredients that just got picked like a couple minutes ago, that egg that just got laid of my spoiled chickens that I love to give treats to every morning. Like there's nothing there's nothing like that. It's so magical. It's so much more than just mouth pleasure. And I feel like if more people like got to experience that, like it'd be a way easier battle. But everything's, the one thing I've come to realize in the last few years is just that literally everything's connected. So like what you consume to like your physical fitness, to the food you eat, to the TV shows you watch, the podcasts you listen to, like it's all connected. So when you're putting that food from like that was, prepared properly, raised properly into your stomach that has actual neurons in it, like that, it's good for your body. But it's also like good for your mental health, like your soul. Like it's just like there's just something to it. And like we've become so disconnected with the food system and what we eat. And there's definitely a direct, I would say, correlation, but I'm going to say causation with the mental health in the country and our disconnected nature of the food system.
Well, I was literally just that's so funny you said that because I was literally just thinking disconnected from nature, like those words, but the nature of the food system, but also nature itself. We're just disconnected from the fact that we're a part of nature, first of all, but that has like physiological ramifications. Like if we're not exposed to sun, I mean, I've talked about this ad nauseum on the podcast, but just like how important sunlight is for so many different pathways in the body. And what do people do? They wear sunblock and they wear sunglasses and they completely block out the sun because that's what the centralized powers to be said, that's what you're supposed to do if you want to be healthy. Meanwhile, the opposite is happening. And I think that just reflects at every level because it really jacks up our dopamine systems too. If we're not getting grounded, or we don't get our bare feet on the earth, we're not, eating real food and exposed to the right microbes and getting the right inputs that we need from our natural environment, that regulates our system. And so when we're dysregulated, we tend to reach for things like fast food or drugs or alcohol or whatever it is to get that dopamine system firing because we're no longer getting that baseline level of happiness that we would get if we were living in a way that was conducive to our species.
Oh yeah. Yep. um when you like that, the dopamine system from like, that you look for like in drugs or alcohol. Like when I started like getting into like the food stuff, like I noticed like it's like exact same. Like so when some people would ask me like, oh, like, because I'm not like a sober person, if you will. I have some drinks. I literally like don't even put any rules on myself. Like,
That's good.
but like people will ask me like, "Oh my God, are you like, what if you relapse like this and that?" I'm like, dude, do you know how high I've been the last few years? Like it's like like everything I do, like getting some sun, working out, like having a good meal, like these things. I feel like I'm in like a video game, and I'm just like, just like boosting up my character, and you're also tasting these good things and feeling these good things. Like I do hot yoga 3 nights a week, and like it always sucks driving there and maybe like walking in, but it is always like absolute bliss after that class. And it's just like it's the highest of highs. And yeah, so I'm still a junkie, and no, I will not be an addict again.
Well, that's the thing that I think people don't understand is, and this is actually really interesting also in like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, they have a whole like study on this, which is like what substances do people gravitate towards naturally and what that indicates about deficiencies in their system because we're supposed to be high on life. And
Yeah.
if we're not, that's a problem and we're going to reach for the junk food TV, the junk information, the junk media, or the junk food, whatever it is to fill that void because ultimately that system does need to be engaged in some way in order for us to basically be sustained and to like live a fulfilled life, but those are only like short-term hits instead of getting that long-term like enhanced baseline
Yeah.
of just like bliss on a daily basis.
Yep. You mentioned the sun exposure part. Are you team vitamin or team hormone for the D?
uh Hormone for sure, 100%.
It's just crazy how like I'm not like very like literate and like scientific, you know, terms, and I'm not like a PhD, like, nothing like that, but it's just so crazy that like how many things sunlight and vitamin D does for the body. And like, it's just so much more than just like a run of the mill vitamin.
Well, the crazy thing about it, and I think that people think about vitamin D so wrong, I totally look at it as a biomarker for sun exposure. I don't look at it as like this thing that we just need to optimize by itself because if you look at all the studies actually that have been done clinically for vitamin D supplementation, you don't see very many positive health outcomes. And that's because we're totally missing the point. It's like vitamin D, your vitamin D levels are telling you how immersed you are in nature, essentially. And if you're not out in nature, you're not getting sunlight, then your vitamin D is a really good way of being able to determine how deficient you are in UV light, but ultimately that's just reflecting sunlight. So I think it's really, really important to think about it that way, because then it allows you to actually make the actions that would make the biggest difference in your life versus like, oh, I just need to pop a pill for that.
Yeah. That the sunlight thing was so big for me, not from when when I first got sober. It wasn't for a few years that I started really like looking at health differently and nutrition. So like one of the first things is like I did the keto for a while, but really didn't give a shit about nutrition. Um, One of the first things, I think it was like 2020 when I really started getting into like the health and nutrition spot, was cutting out like all seed oils and processed foods. Now, me, when I was a kid, as a child, I mean, I was like, I'm pretty pasty right now. It's winter, but I was very, very ghostly white Irish child. If I was out in the sun for like 30 minutes with no sunblock, I was burning, and it was going to be painful and it was going to be horrible. And that's just like how I operated my whole life. Fast forward to 2020, I like clean up my diet and like stop eating seed oils, stop eating processed food, mostly steak and eggs. But my relationship with the sun has completely shifted.
Hmm.
Like I fast forward, so that's 2020. Fast forward a year later, I'm in Costa Rica at a bachelor party with like 20 people. I'm like, there's a bunch of like even like Spanish kids that I'm friends with, like darker skin complexions than me. I'm like the only one not wearing sunblock, and I'm like one of the only ones that didn't get sunburn. And like it's just night and day difference. And that's like, I'll keep going back to it. Everything's connected, so everything you do, like what you eat might affect the way your body receives sunlight. Like it's crazy. It's crazy when you think about it, but it really kind of makes sense.
It does. And another scary part of that is that a lot of people are on medical drugs that make them like photosensitive, quote unquote, so that they do burn more easily, or that they start to fear the sun because, my doctor told me it's going to harm me if I go out in the sun while I'm on this drug. Meanwhile, the sun could replace like all of your drugs plus more if you were using it in the right way. And the really interesting thing about the seed oils part of the story is, um, so saturated fats, which you'd find in like meat and eggs and a lot of animal-based foods, they are very stable and they stack really nicely on top of each other, and they make really strong, robust cell membranes. And our skin turns over so quickly that the fats that we're eating through our diet are directly influencing the way that our skin barrier is being formed. And so if we're eating a lot of seed oils, which are like the polyunsaturated fats, those don't stack nicely on each other and they have a very low melting temp. That's why they're liquid at room temperature. And it makes your cell membranes also more fragile and more like liquefied, let's say, so that when you go into the sun, now your skin no longer has that tight barrier to actually protect itself from some of the intense rays that are coming down, and you're going to burn more easily. It's just the way it is. And so it's an amazing testament that you've directly seen that in your own life when you're switching to more animal-based fats and cutting out the junk, that you can directly see like now you're tolerating the sun, and that's how it's supposed to be.
I love when scientifically literate people like you embrace like a holistic, like, you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Like you don't just like see some study that was paid for by big sunscreen and like you're like, nope, 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 sun, that's it. This is like, you know what I mean? Like it's just so nice to hear. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I fully disdain people like that, and there's many of them on Instagram that are just like, if there's not a PMID for it, they're not gonna think that it's real. Versus like my approach is really like in alignment with Dr. Jack's approach, which is like nature is the ultimate randomized control trial. We
Hmm.
should be trying to mimic what's going on in nature if we want to create health in our own bodies. And just because there's no clinical trial for it doesn't mean it's not true. Because the way science is, like the way it's conducted, isn't the perfect tool for answering a lot of the questions in health, because health is so multifactorial and there's so many different variables that you can't control. So like if you're doing a scientific study or like a clinical study on something, like you might get a negative result on, let's say, I don't know, I was going to say sun exposure, but there's not been a single study on sun. in any context because you can't like isolate it as a variable. So they'll just do like just UV light. And all the studies that show that UV light is harmful is from UV light in isolation. It's absolutely crazy because you never get UV light in isolation. It's always with the full spectrum of sunlight, which is a lot of red and infrared. 50% of sun is like red and infrared. But anyway, so the studies that are being conducted in science are just not very well formulated to actually answer the questions at hand when it comes to health. And so it's not really a good way to kind of assess what is best for you to incorporate into your life because health is so individual and it's so N of one. And if we're not paying attention to what's going on in our own bodies and how we're feeling, and we're constantly just outsourcing our responsibility to XY expert or this paper or that paper, then we're totally missing the point, which is like the way that you're feeling and the way that you're reacting to your environment and the way that your health is a direct reflection of how you're behaving. And if you just pay attention to those different factors that are influencing the way you feel, then you can, you know, crack the case and you can be the own like master or your own expert.
Yeah. Yep. From like from like from what we're talking about now, like health and nutrition to like political debates to social to even like dating stuff. Like you could get on these podcasts and like everybody has a study for everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I like if pick a one random opinion and like as long as it's not too absurd, like I will go find you a study that says, "Oh yeah, that's correct." But like one of my favorite quotes ever, I'm going to butcher it, but it's Richard Horton, editor of The Lancet, towards the end of his career. I mean, this is a major scientific paper. And like towards the end of his career, he said the case against science is like pretty straightforward. Like I'm butchering the quote. Don't get up. But he goes on to say the case against science is pretty straightforward. Out of all the scientific research, perhaps half is simply untrue. You know, from small sample sizes to biased people doing the studies to, you know, there's a million different ways that a study or a paper can be just butchered, doctored, manipulated. So this is like literally the editor of the Lancet saying that, like, yeah, like out of all the stuff we got on here, half of it's garbage. So like anytime, like if I were to go into like any kind of like debate or discussions, like I like to start off with that quote just so we know that, like, you know, when you, not you, but somebody like brings up some study to tell me that, you know, no, you have to use sunscreen. It's like, all right, well, half of the sign, at least half. I think it's closer to like, be honest, I think it's closer to like 80-90% is of the scientific literature. That means like papers that people cite, papers, this is information that your doctors use to prescribe you something.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, usually all right, so usually the doctors just get the note from the pharma companies and then go from there. But some of them look at studies. So
Yes.
but Richard Horton says half, I say 80-90% are not true, but it's just, you know, it's we're in the information age.
Yeah.
So now it's not, you know, it's not like you have all information at your fingertips. You do, but then you also have 10x of false information. So it's not like everybody can get information, but like more than half, most of the information out there is just simply not true.
Yeah, it's all about discernment today because we're constantly flooded with information. And if we don't have the ability to discern what's true or what's false, then it's like just totally overwhelming. The one thing that I was thinking of while you're saying that is like, well, actually two things. There was a paper in Nature a couple of years ago showing that about 80% of published results were unreproducible. So that goes to what you're saying. There's a lot of, it could be due to bias, it could be due to falsified data, it could also be due to a specific context, or like maybe the researchers have a certain variable that they don't know about that they're doing every time, but if somebody else in another lab tries to do it, then they can't get the same result because of whatever the variable is. And then the other thing that's really interesting about this is like the paradox of the fact that you could look up, so let's say sunscreen's good, sunscreen's bad. You could look up PubMed papers on both sides probably, and you could get reputable scientific articles that represent each point of the argument, which means that there's a paradox there, like which is basically pointing to like you need to do more work to figure out what's true for yourself because there's experts on both sides of the field that are saying totally opposite things. And so there's truth somewhere in there, and it's just a matter of finding the context and what makes sense for you, because there is always the context of like the n equals 1, the individual like in your lifestyle with your goals, like what is best for you, because the literature is only going to tell you what's best on average, and the average may not apply to any one individual in the population.
Yep. Who was the guy that you said nature? Like
Oh, Jack Cruz.
okay. Like that's so like when I'm trying to navigate through this world of like I'm actually like very interested in like science. Like I love talking like about studies and like learning more. I don't just like blindly trust them, but it's
Good.
like something I'm interested in. So um like with the I just overall like big picture view, like you have to develop like pattern recognition skills. Like so when you given a new piece of information or you know a new study, a new paper, a new pharmaceutical product, like Ozempic comes out, like you know something like that. You have to have these pattern recognition skills where you're like, okay, who's benefiting from this? Who's making money from this? Who's speaking out against it? And then you have to weigh all these variables and you know it's I think that I have like superhuman pattern recognition skills that I developed from you know my weirdly enough like my time as a drug addict. You know what I mean? Like just seeing like that's like goes back to you know big pharma during the initial prescription pill push and double the dose. You know, they have doctors selling these things to people. When I was an addict, most of like that's what we would do. We would go to doctors and then doctors would write prescriptions. Like so, you know, it kind of gave me like a very, you know, unique view at like just like the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and then I took that same view and looked at the food industry, the health fitness industry, you know, all these different things. So you really have to develop a pattern recognition skill because nobody's able to read everything. You know what I mean? So you have to like and the other thing is like find people like that were right about stuff and then trust them on that. You know, like not blindly trust, but like what boggles my mind, like not to get political, right?
Please do. It's fine.
All
This is
right, so
undoctrinate yourself.
yeah, so so the war in Iraq, it's horrible. We killed 1 million Iraqis. We killed 500,000 children. When we have another war pop up, like let's say Ukraine, are you just gonna like just blindly believe all of the same talking heads that were so wrong that were responsible for 500,000 children being killed by our tax dollars? Or are you gonna maybe see what the other person has to say that was right about that? You know what I mean? So, and that's like, you know, the past few years, like with like COVID, the jabs, like, you know, what to do and what not to do. Like, just try to take a deep breath, take a step back, and try to like identify people that weren't blatantly wrong about the last thing. I'm not saying nobody could ever be wrong, but when someone has different incentives, um, you know, financial, malicious, when they have these, usually if you kind of like take a step back and then look at their history, it kind of shows itself. So that's, you know, pattern recognition is a very useful skill today.
Absolutely. And I was also thinking when you're saying about finding the people who have a track record of being right is just also the people who are brave enough to stand up and say what they feel is true, even when it's not a popular opinion.
Hmm.
Because that, I think COVID was a big wake up call for a lot of people, that like the people in control of things don't actually know what they're doing. And they've just caught in multiple lies time and time again, like over the course of the past few years. And there's no sort of like retribution for anything that they've done or the harm that they've caused society to people's health, and they can't be trusted, and they need to be held accountable, and they're seriously not being at all. Like people are just, I feel like, forgetting about what happened and just trying to move on with their lives. But like it's really really important to understand that the people involved in that decision making with regards to the lockdowns and the mandates, and just like holding them accountable and never letting that happen again, because it's just I honestly think that it was a big wake up call for a lot of people, because even me, like before COVID happened, COVID first started, I was a little bit wary about it. I didn't know if it was actually as bad as they were saying it was. And so my partner and I were just like wary about it. We weren't really going out much. We were just trying to figure out what was going on. They said 6 weeks to stop the spread or whatever. And then that turned into like months and months. And we're like, okay, this is a
2 weeks.
hoax.
It was 2 weeks
It was 2 weeks first, then 6, and then it was like months.
Yeah.
And then we were like, this is clearly bullshit. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that this is bullshit at this point. And then we wised up real quick to what was going on. But prior to that, I mean, we kind of just trusted that they were going to do the right thing in the case of like a global pandemic, for example, or plandemic, or whatever you want to call it. And so now I am much more critical of the system than I was. And that's even saying a lot, because I've always been very critical of the system because it failed me so much as a child, and like just my health growing up, and just never served me. And so I've always had a critical eye of like authority figures in general, but specifically in medicine. And now they just have none of my trust or like even my respect at this point. Like, I think everybody should be forced to earn your trust and respect. It's not a given, and it shouldn't be. And these people need to be held to a higher standard because they're literally killing people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. What I mean, so this is one of the reasons that I'm actually thankful for my checkered past, because like you know, if like I didn't if that didn't happen to me, I could easily see how people get, they pick a side. So nobody wants to admit they're wrong. You know what I mean? And then like when you pick the side that like has like, all like the head doctors, the guys, the head pharma guys, the guys, speaking on something with authority, when you pick that side, it's really, really hard to like turn around and be like, oh yeah, I was wrong about that. So like, people get sucked in, and like there are still people like advocating for like pregnant women and like young children to like get these medical procedures, and it's scary to me, and it's sad. I also get angry about it, but it's just it's weird to think about, like we're like, years later. I mean, everybody knows what really happened for the most part. And yeah, there's still, I think I just saw like an advertisement for Shot 10 coming up this fall. And I don't know if they're fake Twitter accounts or if these people are real, but there's like people out there repping it hard still. And
They must be bots at this point. Like, who are you?
you gotta be. You gotta be. I don't meet them in person, so it's gotta be bots, but I don't know.
And that's crazy given the context of, I think it was the Cleveland Clinic that put out a paper showing that the more boosters you had, the higher your likelihood of getting COVID. It's the opposite effect.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And then oh, I mean, I just feel so bad for like, all the young athletes with like myocarditis and
Mhm.
health conditions. And I would tweet this out sometimes because like how serious that is. I would tweet out like your heart doesn't heal, it scars.
Yeah.
And like some people would be like, no, that's BS. And they pull up this study and like this. And I'm like, dude,
You're
like,
correct.
have you actually read that? Like, trust me, you can like regenerate. There's like techniques to like regenerate tissue and stuff. But for the most part, like, you do not want a heart injury, especially at a young age, because that'll carry with you through your whole life.
Absolutely. It's totally different than organs like liver or skin that have a very high regenerative capacity. The heart, it really does. Like, it can patch over, but that damage is going to be reflected like throughout the course of your life. It's not just going to go away by itself. So you are really setting yourself up for potential issues down the line, which is really sad, because these demographics of like young men in particular are at the highest risk, and they're at the lowest risk of getting issues from COVID. So it's like, why are we doing this?
Yep. Yeah, and kids are basically no risk, but they're
Exactly.
still they let's risk it all and give them something special.
It's sick.
It's scary. It's really scary. And then like when you also combine that with like the knowledge that the pharmaceutical industry basically owns the news and newspapers from all their advertisements that they do. That's not to turn over customers. That's to basically handcuff, that news agency or whatever. Pick one, Fox, CNN, any of them. But these companies benefit off people. They don't benefit off people being healthier and more independent. So that's when they'll start to release this new stuff that says like, hey, exercise is linked to white supremacy, and like don't get sun exposure. And like when COVID, like when the first year of COVID, like I'm on my Twitter timeline like telling like screaming like, listen, like white people, yes, but especially black people. I'm like, yo, you guys need to get vitamin D. Like you're
What?
like, because it was winter and like there's
Yes.
something like, it's depending on your skin, you could absorb it easier or you
Yeah.
need more. So if it's winter and you're in New York and you haven't, felt the sun on your skin for months, like, and like and then they turn around and they turn the turn the vaccine thing into a racial saying, hey, this group's first up. And it's just it's so disgusting to think about that happened and it's still happening. It's horrible. It's so sad, but it has woken a lot of people up, and
It
me for one
is.
of them. Like 2020, I was in Boston working a construction job, and then COVID happened 2 weeks to slow. So I came back. I was like, why stay in Boston when the shitty city's shut down? So I came back to Jersey to stay with my family in the woods, like nice, beautiful thing. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna work out every day for the next 2 weeks before I go back to Boston. I'll go back to Boston jacked. And then two
2 weeks
weeks,
turned to 6.
yeah, it turned into 2 months,
6 months.
turned into 2 years, and I haven't missed a day yet. But
Thanks, COVID.
yeah. So that's when I really started getting the fitness thing, but then also like the nutritional aspect, and like that's like that all happened at the same time. Like, you know what I mean? So like the COVID stuff, the nutrition stuff, the fitness. So I was just like a melting pot of dangerous conspiracy theories that
Mm.
make me never go to the doctor.
That's how you know they're good conspiracy theories as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
The real conspiracy theories are the ones that are telling you that you need to see doctors to be healthy. And meanwhile, they're so limited in their tool sets. Like you go to a doctor if you want to be diagnosed with an illness or given a drug.
Hmm.
That's the only tools that they are have available. That's
Yep.
what they're trained to do. They're not trained to. They have no nutrition training. They have no training in any sort of lifestyle interventions either. So you're actually better off Googling shit versus going to your doctor for issues on nutrition because they have no information on that. And I was actually recently talking to a physician down in Tennessee, and this was related to the conversation we had earlier about like PubMed and reading papers because she was saying that she was talking to a colleague of hers at the practice. She works at like a general practitioner's practice, and there's multiple doctors there. And she was saying, there's a bunch of papers on, the benefits of sunlight and UV exposure, and the doctors, the colleague said like, oh, like where can I look that up? And she said PubMed, and he was like, what's that?
That's funny.
So
That's
yeah,
funny.
your doctors aren't staying up to date on the literature, and the information that they're taught in school is at least 20 years outdated typically.
Yep.
So it's very slow to like update based on the cutting edge science. It's just a very slow moving field. And so your doctors are in medical school, they're already 20 years behind. And then by the time they get into practice, they're just so burnt out from the awful hours and training and the immense debt that they went into that they're just trying to make their money back and make ends meet, and they're not worried about like staying up to date in the most recent literature and making sure that they're like improving your health to the best of their ability. They're just trying to survive themselves.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I I love doctors, not all of them. So one you know, I guess maybe not controversial here in this space, but in the outside world, a controversial view I have is that like when I look at like all like if you give me 100 doctors, I would say like I'm gonna be generous. I would say like maybe 60 of them are pharmaceutical sales reps. They're not like they're not trying to like make you healthy or find root cause stuff like or like actually like better your life. They're trying to, numb the pain, get you on a script, keep you stable, keep you generating. It's what I like to call a slow profitable death.
They're farming your life force energy
Yeah.
for money.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary, but that's why you have witch doctors like myself that are I'm here to help you out, you know. Um
But it's wild though, just to think about. It's a system that's set up to fail from just like the educational standpoint. If we think about just public education, starting in very young grades, you're already being indoctrinated with specific information. You're just being taught to regurgitate information. You're not taught how to critically think. And then that just creates these kind of like automatons that are just going into society and being like cogs in the wheel versus people who are actually challenging the status quo and trying to grow and trying to change things. Like the system is actually set up to prevent against that, which makes sense because the system is built to preserve itself and it doesn't want to be changed, and it's by its nature going to be rigid in that way. And so I think a lot of the issues that we face really comes down to like an educational level, because if we were training people how to critically think, then we wouldn't be running into these issues because we would be open to the point of like, oh, this isn't working, we're just going to change it.
yep.
What's the problem?
And COVID really opened my eyes up to this because, early on there was a lot of doctors speaking out because they were getting like, like I don't know what you call them, but they're like direct commands on
Mm-hmm.
what to do. So like COVID person comes out, has this reading, put on ventilator, give this, give
Yes.
that. And that's not doctoring. That's not what doctors do. Doctors, a patient comes in, engage, discuss, do this, do that. Like it's like it's more like independent of each situation rather than like just a big like a mandatory to do. So like that summer of 2020, I remember like, the ventilator things going on. And I remember hearing one doctor speak on the COVID thing, and it's not about oxygen getting to your lungs. It's like similar to scuba diving. What's that poison? Like whatever
Or like
that's called.
overbreathing.
No, no, no. When you like rise too quickly or
Oh, like
something.
the bends.
I don't know. It's like some blood thing that you get from scuba
Yes.
diving. And I was like, and then like, so I'm looking into that and like, what do they do with those people that like, that happens to? They like give them a steroid.
Mm.
So like, so I'm thinking to myself, this is me, like an ex dope head. And I'm like, oh, if the COVID reaction is similar to that, then why don't we give the COVID patients steroids? And then like, this is summer 2020 when they're killing thousands of people on ventilators. And then, a few months later, like, oh shit, the ventilators didn't work. They actually killed people. And shit, part of our process is going to be to treat people with steroids. And then I'm like, wait a minute, like, dude, I'm an ex-dope head. I never went to, yeah, yeah. Yeah, like, dude, I never went to school for this. Like, I like went to Montclair State for business management and cheated my way through college. And why aren't you guys like, how are you not able to like recognize this pattern? You know? So it's like that's why I look at majority of doctors like that. But for that being said, there's also like amazing doctors that
There
like
are.
actually care about you and want you to
Mhm.
be healthy, and finding them is difficult, but they're out there.
Mhm. I mean, I think a lot of people go into the field with the right intentions, but again, the way it's structured is just like structured to burn them out, make them in massive debt. Like I have a friend who initially wanted to go in and really like improve people's lives and do general practice and like try to help prevent disease to begin with. And she ended up going in like 200K debt and worked like 18-hour days. And she ended up like pivoting to go into plastic surgery because she just wants to pay her fucking bills and live her life now. She doesn't have the bandwidth or the energy to actually try to change the systemic issues at hand now. And so that's the system that we're dealing with. It's like designed to burn these doctors out and like help. It kind of just like leeches away their passion that they went into the field for, and now they're just trying to just get by essentially.
Yeah. Yep. And one you're just making this click in my head. Like one big big thing that like like the pivot in the medical industry, like right now, I think that humans right now in America should have a life expectancy of like 100 to 140. Like I really think that's like 100 should be like minimum, still moving around good. The problem is like we have like hundreds of thousands of years of holistic approaches that we've developed. And then sometime in the early 1900s, then you have this like industrial, like BS Rockefeller, where they're taking oil products to make pharmaceuticals. Like it's like this crazy thing. And like part of that was bastardizing the holistic approach. So like when you bring these two things together, like I'm not a holistic, like there's this guy Solbra on Twitter that was just like telling people like not to give them antibiotics if they have septic shock in the hospital. And like I'm like, I'm like, dude, relax, bro. But like it's like this beautiful union's possible where you still like have holistic and nature and you also have technology and innovation, and when those two things like come together, it's it's going to be a game changer for human existence. It's lovely. I think that the first time those two things are coming together is like right now for a very select group of people, and we're gonna see over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years like what really we're capable of. But it's just scary how hard it is to find that niche of the balance between the two.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think everybody could agree that the Western medical approach is amazing for acute care. Like, it can keep you alive in a pinch. If you have some sort of like life-ending injury, you could have your life saved by the approaches, but they really fall short in the chronic care sector because they're trying to use the same tools they use in the acute sense for the chronic sense, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So I think a lot about like germ theory and when that started. Also, I think in like 1800s, maybe late 1800s, also in like the industrialization era. And we started like looking at everything mechanistically and like breaking things down into smaller and smaller pieces to try to understand like what things are made of. But we never actually thought about like putting the pieces back together to look at the whole picture as a whole. So the perfect example of that is like we go around thinking that like bacteria are bad and viruses are bad. Meanwhile, we literally wouldn't exist without them. And so it's like we're just so fixated on also like the intellectualization of it. Like we can't see bacteria with our eyes. We just assume they're there and we assume things are dirty and germy and we need everything to be sterile and that would be paradise. Meanwhile, the exact opposite is true. Like we want bacterial diversity and viral diversity and fungal organisms, and we need all of them in order for our bodies to actually function properly. So I think it's also like a mindset thing that's been like programmed into us from only the past couple generations. It's not an old thing, it's a very recent thing. And so I think once we can come to the realization as a society that like germs are good, quote unquote, or like there's a context within which they're potentially bad, or there's like maybe a state of your body that makes you susceptible to infection versus like this bug causes this infection. No, like if you're exposed to salmonella on some lettuce, you're not necessarily going to get poisoning from it. But if your microbiome is compromised in some way or you're not healthy, then you're going to be more susceptible to those organisms overgrowing, causing an issue. So I think that's really the context that's missing in a lot of cases. And I think once we can get that, it's going to be a real game changer with regards to like the systemic way of thinking.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then back to everything's connected. That's your bacteria in your gut. That's your gut microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, you actually have neurons in your stomach. You have neurons in your heart. You have neurons, most of them in your brain. So like not only are all those things gonna react, like have a physical reaction, but you're also gonna have a mental reaction. So that's like, just everything's connected.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think you'll find this interesting. I just recently finished up a postdoc at UPenn, and the lab that I was in, his name is Christoph Theis, but he has a member of his lab that was working on this really cool project relating to exercise and dopamine. And she published her paper, I think it was at the end of 2021 or maybe early 2022. And the paper was really cool. And it showed that if this was in rodents, so you basically had rodents exercising at like free will. They'll go on like the wheels and they'll run, and it's part of like their natural behaviors. They like feel the intrinsic motivation to run. If you take away their microbiome, they run less, they engage in less exercise. Then basically they did some studies and they found out there's a specific group of microbes that's making endocannabinoids that's getting secreted into like through the gut and interacting with the vagus nerve, that's traveling up to the brain, and it's sending information to the brain to release dopamine in response to exercise via this endocannabinoid. Yes. And so they were able to actually give back no microbiome, but they just gave the endocannabinoid and they restored the wheel running. And they showed that essentially there's a group of bacteria that make these endocannabinoid molecules. They're called lipid amides. And when those are present, people feel intrinsically rewarded to exercise and they'll engage in regular exercise as part of their routine. But if these molecules are missing, these bacteria are missing, people are going to be like, quote unquote, lazy, but really they're not getting the inherent dopamine reward from the exercise and they don't have the intrinsic motivation to actually get them to engage in an exercise routine.
That's very interesting.
Isn't
Yeah,
it?
I do love that. You know, man, that's
So it's fascinating. I mean, it's just one testament to like the importance of these bugs that live in us and alter the way that we're feeling and thinking and the way that we're behaving in a way that we're just only beginning to understand. But ultimately, I think like we don't have to understand the mechanisms in order to understand what we should be doing. And really, it just comes back to nailing the basics, like getting sunlight, getting grounded, having good quality food, having good quality water, moving your body, having good relationships. What more is there?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Avoiding glyphosate. That's a big
Oh my
one.
God. Oh my God. It's unavoidable today, apparently.
Well, that's why at the steak and the egg at my tasting menu, I know that there's some places in the US, but I haven't done like a deep dive. So hopefully somebody could shout them out. But right now, like at my tasting menu, anything that I eat myself, anything I make for other people, it is always imported flour from Italy.
Amazing.
Because it's like when I was talking about GMO the other day, like when they GMO produce or whatever kind of plant you're eating, it's not the actual like GMO that's like a big scary monster to me. I don't care about that like that much. Like that's not really a big deal. Ideally, I would not want it, but what's the big deal is why they GMO it. They
Yes.
GMO it so they could spray it with glyphosate like literally right before they harvest it. So, you have all these people with like gluten sensitivities and like people with like mental health problems, skin disorders, like the list goes on. And like it's like, no, you didn't eat like one piece of food that poisoned you. You ate everything for the last how many years that's been sprayed with this chemical that we know gives you cancer. Like, you know what I mean? So but I get all my flours imported, all my sugars like minimally processed, no seed oils on the menu, and the whole
Amazing.
the whole thing is like farm to table. So it's all my chickens that are the eggs, and I have a big garden that me and my mom do all my own herbs. So it's
Wow.
yeah, try to keep it as natural as possible.
That's amazing. I can't wait to come experience it. It's going to be so good. You're also making me think, with regards to the glyphosate story, like there's a lot of research showing that pesticide X, Y, or Z, whatever chemicals are spraying on, it's like, oh, it's not dangerous for human health or whatever from some isolated study. The problem is, and this also goes with the vaccine story too, is that there's no research showing that if you combine all these things together, they're not harmful. And the
Right.
same with the vaccine schedule. You look in 1992, that was the year I was born, the vaccine schedule like blew up. Now it was like 75 shots within the first 2 years of life. There's only ever been safety studies on, if you're lucky, like the individual shots, but some of them also just get like grandfathered in because they're similar to other shots that were already used. But there's no studies to show like if you give all of these shots within 2 years that you're not harming that child or you're not creating long-term issues. And I just think that's crazy, especially in the context of like autoimmunity, like the rise of autoimmunity. Like we really just don't know what we could be causing with just our ignorance. And the same thing occurs with like food additives. Like we study food additives in isolation. We're like, oh, it's safe, but what about in combination? And what about over the course of years of eating these things every day? Like we don't know.
Yep. I call it, I forget what it's called. I call it like drop bucket theory.
Okay.
So it's like your body is a bucket,
Uh-huh.
and like each like little thing is a drop in the
Oh
bucket, like
yeah.
each toxin. So like the glyphosate they sprayed on your lettuce, the BPA that's lining your can, like the microplastics in your water bottle, like each one is a drop in the bucket. And like it's just like all the positive things in that if you go outside and touch grass, like you're not going to change tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a one drop in the bucket. So, and the negative aspect, it works the same. I think, everybody's different, so we have different tolerances for certain things, but when you're when you're bombarded by all these toxins and everything you do, everything you touch, like the clothing you wear, the receipt paper you're handed, like
Oh, cringe.
yeah, yeah. So like when you're bombarded by these things, um it just adds up and that bucket's going to get full. And when that thing overflows, you're dead. You know,
Mhm.
but the same for like the positive things, like, you know, like me eating chicken or eggs from my chickens as opposed to like some BS like factory farmed like chicken never saw sunlight eggs. So that's like a one small little thing, and like me touching grass and like drinking out of metal, and you know, not drinking like bottled water. It's like little tiny things that all add up. You have, you know, every day you're going to make like 1,000 small decisions that you don't even notice you're making.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's the crazy thing is like ignorance is not bliss when it comes to health because just because you're ignorant of something, it's still going to harm you. It doesn't matter whether or not you're aware of it. And I mean, in some ways, if you're aware of it, it becomes worse because then you also get the stress response to like, oh my God, I know I'm doing this harmful thing. But you can also use that like anxiety around that, whatever it is, to just avoid the thing. So like I think awareness is so important in that case because we're just in an environment that's totally novel to our bodies.
Yep.
We're just not equipped to deal with this, and so we just need to try to just be as cognizant of what we're putting in and on ourselves as we can.
All right, I'm going to make a big admission now.
Okay. What is it?
So with my, I don't want people to freak out and think you like have to do every little thing perfectly. Like me, like I'm still not like even at my ideal space.
Mhm.
So like I still like drink some diet soda.
Mhm.
Like I'm not, but like there'll be people who I engage with on social media that are like, you know, diet soda is not bad for you.
Yeah.
Look at these studies, they proved it. And I'm like, dude, aspartame is the fecal matter of E. coli. There's no study you could show me that like tells me that this is like either even or not bad for you. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing, there's like that, just the pattern recognition side of my brain says no. E. coli, fecal bacteria, like fecal matter, E. coli, sweetness, no. Like that's just like doesn't work. But I, with that being said, like I'm not like a completely like 100% clean person, so I have a diet soda like here and there. Like, you know, like you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be aware. So like when I speak about it, I tell people like, no, diet soda is not healthy for you. Ideally, you shouldn't drink it. And yes, I do drink it sometimes. Like
Yeah.
I'm not perfect, but you know, we all have like little vices here and there. And you know, it's just about being aware and conscious about what you're doing. So like you know when you're having a positive or a negative. So like I have some like regular bacon sometimes, like regular grocery store bacon or chicken, but you know, general practice, I am a lot more concerned about sourcing my poultry or pork as opposed to my beef,
Mhm.
because beef are ruminants. They have four stomachs. They basically get rid of a lot of the toxins that might be in their diet, while chicken and pork have measly one stomach systems like us, and they hold on to those toxins in the fat in their fat. So, you know, do I never eat bacon or never eat grocery store chicken? No, but I'm aware of it. I limit my consumption, and you know, it's just if you have a bucket filling with toxins, you better know which toxins are going into that bucket, you know? So
Mhm.
you don't want to be ignorant to these things, but at the same time, you don't have to be like holier than now and never touch like a bad thing, you know?
Totally. And I
You
mean,
got room in the bucket.
yeah, exactly. And it's not a matter of like feeling guilty about it. It's like you said, it's just building the awareness so that what you're doing on average is going to matter the most, and things you do here and there, that's not going to really move the needle much versus like what like the foundation that you've built and the way that you're living your life on a daily basis. That's going to make the biggest difference. And that's what people really need to focus on versus like I mean, I've been on this journey now for oh my it's been like 13, 14 years, and it started out with just like losing weight and then just like counting calories, right? And then going to the gym a lot. And then developing an eating disorder and IBS, and then figuring out that, oh, it's actually the food quality that matters, not the quantity, not the calories. And then that
This is funny. You went from calorie counter to food quality. I
yeah,
went from strictly macros keto to food quality. See, we can
all
all,
roads lead
yeah,
to Rome.
we can all find the path eventually. The
Yes,
way.
it is the way. I mean, I think maybe in some ways anything in the wellness culture can be a gateway drug to like everything
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
It's just a matter of like just following the threads because I mean, once you make one change in your life and you start feeling better, it's like, what else can I change? What else can I do? And then you just keep feeling better, and it's like, I'm gonna just keep following this, obviously, because why wouldn't I want to feel
Yep.
good?
Oh yeah. It's like my circadian rhythm. I love it.
You're really good. You were in bed early last
Well,
night and up early?
I have the chickens. So, and I'm a very good chicken dad. So when that sun's up, they want to get out of that coop and they'll squawk and let me know. So
Oh.
I got to run down there with I bring down my table scraps every morning. So during the day, I, save them up and then they go out and get their morning breakfast treats
Mm.
before they go and declare war on all the bugs in my yard.
Is that before or after they cannibalize their kin? He was telling me earlier that they like to eat chicken carcasses.
Yes, chickens do love to eat chicken. They love to eat scrambled eggs. That's their favorite. And if you want to, like, I put a lot of like red pepper and oregano in their feed. So,
Mm.
like, if there's ever like something that's really good for them, immune system wise. So, if there's ever something you want them to eat, you just scramble it in some eggs, and they will suck it down. Yeah, but yeah, they're not preferred cannibals. I don't think they really care if it's chicken or duck or cow, but they are preferred carnivores.
Yes.
Like if they had one option, it would be meat and bugs over, greens. I give my chickens a balanced diet. They get all the vegetable scraps as well. But yeah, when I think I've seen eggs sold as like
Vegetarian bed.
that's the biggest crock of shit I've ever heard. It's so crazy. I'm like, dude, those are some weak ass chickens you got.
Same with humans. Like, we're not meant to be vegetarians either,
Yeah.
folks.
Yep.
It's wild. I was actually just having this conversation earlier. It's like we understand for all other species that there's a species appropriate diet that animals are supposed to eat. But when it comes to humans, now suddenly it's all ideology instead
Yeah.
of the facts. Like, what do we do best on? There's some flexibility. Like, we can basically survive on anything. But what is leading to optimal health? I mean, that can, I would say, vary based on your ancestral region. Like, if you're from more northern regions where the ground froze, maybe you do better with higher fat, higher protein during the winter compared to somebody who maybe lives more equatorial. Maybe they have access to more carbohydrate rich foods. Maybe it makes more sense for them to eat more of those. But even still, those cultures are always having like meat as a staple as well, or eggs or some sort of animal products.
Yeah.
So I think
And that this all goes back to our like research talk earlier, because like when they'll put out a paper saying like, oh, lower meat consumption like is better for longevity and age, and they cherry pick
yes,
which regions they use. And it's like, oh, like you totally forgot about those Japanese people that eat more beef than anybody. Like, come on. Like, so you could literally like make a paper or a study to support anything that you want in the nutritional space. Like if that wasn't true, there wouldn't be like vegan propaganda out there.
so much vegan propaganda.
Yeah.
The documentaries are really getting out of hand on
Yeah.
Netflix.
And I'm not a carnivore. I'm carnivorous.
Yeah.
But I'm not a carnivore. I like my desserts. I like my vegetables. I even, I love my fresh pasta. So but I mean like the carnivores, I have a lot of carnivore like followers or engagement, and some of them get a little crazy, but I like to say they're not vegan crazy.
There's a special type of crazy that comes out when you're protein deprived and fat deprived.
Yeah. And the weirdest part too is that like, so like for me, like a big passion of mine is like I like look at factory farming of animals, and it's like it pains me. It's
Yeah.
like absolutely, first of all, it's disgusting to eat. Second of all, it's just horrible what they do to these animals.
Yes.
And it's like I don't know why, but I like talk to a lot of vegans. I'm like, all right, we don't agree on this, but can't we just get on board to like maybe like be on the same team and stop like torturing things?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, no, nope. Eat your dogs, eat your kids. It's all the same. Like,
Oh, God.
yeah. So there's got to be a middle ground, but
Yeah, I mean, you would think the regenerative agriculture would be the middle ground because also the topsoils are required to grow your freaking vegetables too. Like, if we don't topsoil, which the animals are needed to make that, then what are we doing? Like, you're not gonna be able to grow your vegetable foods either. So we got to do something, and regenerative ag is the answer.
Yep. Yes, it is. It's the only way you could humans produce food with like a net negative carbon impact.
Exactly.
I'm not a big carbon believer
I mean, I
because
think
of how
that's
green the world is right
yeah,
now
I know. I mean,
compared to
it's
history.
great. Plants
Yeah,
love carbon.
yeah, exactly, exactly. They literally pump that shit in greenhouses to like make
Yes,
them grow better.
exactly.
But yeah, it's balance. Hopefully, we will find our way eventually.
I mean, I think we're gonna have to. It's either that or we're gonna go extinct as a species. I mean, the Earth will be here without us. If we can't figure it out, then I guess that's how it's gonna be. But I think we will. I mean, I think humans are very innovative and very um flexible too when it comes down to it as a species. Like we're able to adapt to so many different environments, and that's what's made us pretty successful.
Very easily manipulated, though.
Yes. That's true.
So
I mean, there's gonna be weeding out of the population for sure.
yeah, yeah. That's what That's what's. It's like I don't think like I have all the answers. I think I have a lot of the good questions.
Yeah.
That's like, but I just get so I see this whole thing as like in like intentional population reduction. So like from the easy answers from the pharmaceuticals to like the COVID to the food at the grocery store, it feels like so intentional and malevolent that I try not to think about that side of it too much because I'm not a pacifist.
Mhm.
So, I just try to stay in like a positive mindset and just, speak to as many people as I can and just you gotta kind of like live by example and just do what you do and just, when people DM me about changing their life, whether it was the addiction part or getting into physical fitness or starting to care about what they ate, like just getting those DMs and messages is just it means a lot. It makes the whole battle worth it.
Yeah, I mean, truly leading by example is the piece that, I mean, you could just talk all day, but if you're just a talking head, then ultimately, I think that's going to show. Versus if you're embodying what you're saying and you're living the life and you're like exuding that energy, people are going to want to be around it. They're going to want to learn more, and they're going to want to try to emulate that too. So I think that's the best way of going about things. You can only just like force people to believe so much, you know? So I think that's really the best approach, and that's also what I try to do as well, while also providing good information. And what you said before, like not having all the answers. I think the best thing about that is like nobody's ever going to have all the answers, but if you have a reliable way of thinking about the world, then you don't need to have the answers because you can figure it out.
Yep, that's it.
This was fun.
Amazing.
Maybe we'll wrap it up, but I think we probably have more conversations on the show. I think people are going to love you, but do you want to just share again where people can find you and maybe where they can eat some of your delicious food if they're in the area?
Yes, of course. All right. So the tasting menu, the steak and the egg, Central New Jersey will be open. Hopefully, not hopefully, definitely sometime in April. I just have to be a little cautious because the weather has to turn. But besides that, just follow me on Instagram, Twitter, cooking_it_keto, or the steak and the egg.
Amazing. And I'll also include the links to everywhere you can find Ryan on the show notes so that you can easily go give him a follow and check out his work. And thank you so much for coming on. This was so fun, and
For
we'll do it
having me.
again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.